Hi, good evening. Happy New Year, everyone. This is the first program of the 2015 season, so I'm excited to be here. So for first-time visitors, I just want to say a special welcome. We hope that you come back frequently, and welcome to the Brower Center living room. For friends and family, welcome back, and thank you for continuing to help us build this and strengthen this community. We're delighted to have you back again. For the last 5 years, we've been building a strong foundation to support the Brower Center network and community. And we've done that to help fulfill our mission to be a crossroads for environmental and social action. We think that our value lies in our connection of the infrastructure, of the physical things like the building, the things that will go on for generations to come, as well as our educational programs and the things that we can give back to our community on an immediate basis. This year, you're going to see a number of these programs developed in conjunction with our tenant community, who are here upstairs in the Brower Center, as well as our extended community as well. Things like film, lectures, programs like tonight, conferences, and we're also even going to be doing, for the first time, an Earth Day celebration. So for those interested, there's going to be plenty of room, and we'd love to have you all participate. Speaking of the community, I want to remind everyone that we have over 30 different organizations that are housed here in the Brower Center. They're environmental groups, social justice groups, and all of them, actually I see a lot of them in the audience tonight, all of them want to interact with you and share with you what they're up to. So I encourage you, take the opportunity while you're here to make those connections. Come back and wander the halls and knock on some doors and explore what we have to offer. In addition to our tenant community, we also have our art and education program, which is part of the reason that we're here tonight. In the 2015 season, we have 3 exhibits that are going to be coming up. The next one will be opening in February, on February 12th, and that's called The Speed of Light. It'll be featuring works by Christina Seeley and Lisa Blatt. It's going to be a fantastic exhibit. So please come back for the opening reception of that, and also stay tuned for more programs associated with that particular exhibit. In May, we have our juried show. It's our 4th annual juried show, and it's going to feature 20 to 25 up-and-coming Bay Area artists. So if you're interested in seeing what's happening in the local art community, that's going to be a great show for you to come back to as well. And we're not quite ready to announce it yet, but the fall, the 2015 Art Act show, that's our premiere show. That's what the Maya Lin show that you're seeing out here is representative of. We've got a great one that's going to be coming up, and we'll be making that announcement. So I'm going to tease you a little bit on that. Encourage you to come back, and I'll share that with you. So also want to just mention, too, for those of you that don't know, the Brower Center relies on the support of our patrons, folks like you, to help us bring the art exhibitions here to the Brower Center, to bring these types of programs here to the Brower Center. So if you're interested in supporting that, either with your ideas or with your pocketbook, we're happy to help, happy to make that happen. You can do that online via our website, and you can also find any one of our staff members, myself included. I think they're all busy working right now, but after the program, certainly find anyone with a name tag, and we'd be happy to help you out on that as well. And last, we do have some audience surveys that are out in the seats there. If you have time while the program's going on, I encourage you to take a moment, just fill out the audience survey there. That helps us identify the key themes and topics, and helps us learn a little bit about you so that we can cater the programming and the content to things that you're interested in. Now, before we get started, I'm going to say most of the introductions for Malcolm, for our guest, but I did want to say a few words about Malcolm himself. It's been an incredible joy getting to know Malcolm over the years that I've been here at the Brower Center. He's just an unforgettable face in our community, and he's unselfishly shared his sage wisdom, his wry wit, and his beautiful prose with us over the years. He's certainly no stranger to the Goldman stage. I've seen him up here a bunch of times. I think my favorite one was when he was interviewing his son Reuben at the commemoration of the Thule wave. And we had 2 generations of the Margolin genius up on our stage, and also I think a 3rd generation with Reuben's daughter who was holding court out in the audience there. Malcolm is an author, publisher, and executive director of Heyday Books, which he founded in 1974 with the publication of his book, The East Bay Out. He's the author and editor of 8 books, including The Ohlone Way, Indian Life in the San Francisco Monterey Bay Area, which was named by the San Francisco Chronicle as one of the 100 most important books of the 20th century by a Western writer. His essays and articles have appeared in a number of periodicals, including The Nation, Small Press, National Works, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Los Angeles Times. It's received dozens of prestigious honors, including the Lifetime Achievement Awards from the San Francisco Bay Area Book Reviewers Association and the California Studies Association. Community Leadership Award from the San Francisco Foundation, and the Cultural Freedom Award from the Lannan Foundation. And also in 2012, he received the Chairman's Commendation from the National Endowment of the Humanities, and he was only the 2nd person in the United States to be so honored. Most recently, Malcolm had the honor of working alongside artist Maya Lin on the current exhibit. And on her Memorial of Environmental Change, What is Missing? And you can actually see some of Malcolm's work in the corridor here. So I encourage everyone, if they haven't had the opportunity to do so, to go following tonight's program and enjoy and devour that to the extent for your joy. But most importantly, I think Malcolm is a beacon of light and inspiration for many of us here at the Brower Center. And we're honored to have him here with us tonight. So if you would, please join me in welcoming tonight's host, dear friend of the Brower Center, Mr. Malcolm Margolin. As well as our special guest, Beth Pratt-Bergstrom, and the Sea Foragers, Kirk Lombard. Thank you.
So, Michael, after all these years, you're calling me Mister?
You gotta respect the elder.
What are people going to think?
They know.
So.
Uh-oh.
Hey, so listen, thanks a lot. This place for me, so Michael, when he was introducing this thing, he kept using the word community. And very often people use that word community and there's a phoniness to it. And there's a kind of hope for something there's something in this place that is developing into a real community. And I have an emotional attachment to it. David Brower was something of a friend and an inspiration. That my son Reuben did that wonderful sculpture out there, that I worked with Maya Lin on this exhibit, that when it was created, they wanted me to move Heyday into this place. And I didn't want to do it because all my friends were here and I'd never get any work done. and there's something about this place. I remember back in 1970 when I first moved into the Bay Area, the Ecology Center was across the street. And we had Ecology Action and all these places that were around here. This is marvelous ground, and it's the most, and when I get in here, when I look around the room and I see Toby and I see John and I see all of my friends in this place, it's just a marvelous place to be. And this is not impersonal ground. It's something that I have the greatest emotional attachment to. Hey, so listen, I'm just going to say a couple of words about Heyday, and then we'll find out who's here. So we do about 25 books a year, and we've got some marvelous books that we've just done. This is like a report from Lake Wobegon. So we've got Bees and Blooms that we did with Gordon Franke up at UC Berkeley. And he runs the Bee Lab. And it's Gordon Franke and the Bee Cadets. And he's got this bunch of people they're into wild bees. We did a book on Bay Area foraging. We did a book on wonderments of the East Bay that I did with Sylvia Linstead about things like buzz pollination, about things like the elderberry. I would love to talk about the elderberry, but I won't. No. Hey, later on there'll be a question period. Somebody asked me about the elderberry. And then we did a book with Lauren Bond down at Metabolic Studios in Los Angeles. And it's an oral history of Under the Spring Street Bridge. It was an art project. And it's a way of looking at history that is absolutely incredible. She interviewed 67 people. But what she did with those interviews was she chopped them up and shuffled the deck and put them into some kind of short excerpts. So instead of the boring kind of thing you usually get with oral histories, there's people talking to one another. There's a liveliness to it that's just great. And then we've got this public works project. So this is the Panama Pacific Exposition. It's the 100th anniversary of it all. And the Panama Pacific Exposition, I think of it in terms of a wonderful German fairy tale where there was and the fairy tale had somebody that was lost in one of those dark German forests. And the person's walking through the forest, and it's nighttime, and the person sees a light. And it comes, and he goes to where that light is, and it's a castle. And he knocks at the door, and he's led into this castle, and there's a big party going on. There's food, there's drink, there's beautiful women, there's a full orchestra, there's the witty conversation going on. It's the height of society. Everything is so delicate and so beautiful. He's given a marvelous meal. It gets to be close to midnight. He's put to sleep in a feathered bed. He wakes up the next morning. He's on the ground under a tree. It was a magical castle that came up every 100 years. And there's something about this Panama Pacific Exposition. It was 100 years ago, and it was a magical thing. It was a creation of the human imagination that was just extraordinary. And now the 100 years are coming up again, and it's back. It'll be back with us this year. So this is some of the stuff we're doing. And what we're talking about today is wildlife in California, in the Bay Area. And I thought that I would end up. Hey, well, how come you're here, Beth?
You asked.
So Beth is a marvelous old friend. Beth, I've known Beth for about 10 years now.
20, I know, it's scary.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So Beth used to work for Yosemite Association, and I met her when I was on the board of Yosemite Association, and we worked together for many years. And then she went off to Yellowstone. She came back, and she's now the California director for National Wildlife Federation. And what's your life like, Beth?
I drive around California and get people excited about wildlife, and it's a fun job. That's what it's like.
So how do you spend your days?
Well, right now I spend them at the computer because I'm working on finishing up a book on California wildlife for Malcolm. So the last few weeks, they let me out today, so thanks for being here with me. But really, my days, we have a big project we're working on, which I'm sure we'll talk about tonight in LA with the mountain lions and building crossings over some of the busiest freeways in the countries for them. We have a great project up here on the harbor porpoises, which Bill Kinnear, I brought all the geeky scientists who I work with to talk at the reception. Some creating wildlife corridors in Silicon Valley for gray foxes, and I think the researchers are coming too. So I have a blast. I live outside Yosemite, but I'm on the road. My office is I-5, as I joke, so I'm on the road quite a bit. But there's a lot of amazing wildlife here. There's a lot of great stories here, and people are doing amazing things here. I think California is creating sort of this new model for conservation with the urban interface, with how we relate to wildlife, which I'm sure we'll talk about tonight. So I have the best job in the world, and I get to work with this guy a lot. So.
Hey, hasn't anybody told you you're supposed to be dismal and
Yeah, that's true, I
negative?
know. That's true, sorry.
So Kirk I've known for a couple of years now, and Kirk gets his feet wet. So,
Well, not today. So much.
Yeah, but you brought the boots, so.
so Kirk has a relationship to wildlife that is absolutely marvelous. He's writing a book for us also, and hey Kirk, bail me out.
Yeah, you're really passing the introduction gig off, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, where would you like me to begin?
So what's your life like? What do you do
Where, what's
professionally?
Well, I have a little 2-year-old boy, and he's kind of running things right now. And we just moved.
That's a step up in managerial.
Yeah, and we just moved down to from San Francisco to Moss Beach, California, and which puts me closer to a lot of the guys that I get my seafood from. I have a sustainable seafood company, Sea Forager Seafood. I run a CSA. We've been up for about 1.5 years, a little less, and we're doing really well with it and trying to stick to a real, well, it's actually my own sort of paradigm of what is sustainable, which is just a real clusterfuck of a problem. I'm sorry.
Oh, go to it.
In any case, so I run that sustainable seafood business. I also have a thing that is called Sea Forager Tours, which kind of came out of my, I worked for the California Department of Fish and Game. I still call it Fish and Game, not Fish and Wildlife. But I worked for them for many years as a onboard observer on rockfish boats, and I was also a observer of the recreational fisheries around San Francisco. So it was my job to canvass the shoreline, see what people were fishing for or catching, and then collect data on that. But I was already really, am I backing up way too far here?
No, keep going.
Okay. I was already really far gone on the fish obsessions. So it was kind of like a perfect job, and I did that for 7 years, where I just sort of canvassed the area and collected notes and stuff, and everything. I just learned a lot because the shoreline, the wildlife that I was that I'm most interested in and sort of connected to. We can even say sort of on a spiritual level, if it's cool to say that, but I feel connected more to the intertidal zone. And that's where I spent a lot of my time, and so the intertidal zone, when your beat is San Francisco, is a urban. San Francisco Bay is an urban wildlife area, and that's the one that I kind of have become very intimate with. And you know, if you do a Google of me, it will be very interesting. You'll notice that the word monkey face will come up. Raise your hand if you know what a monkey face, what that means. Right, there are actually a few people who know this. There's a species of prickleback that lives along the California coast called the monkey face eel. It's not really an eel, it's a prickleback. And I'll just let you go and look at what I've done in relation to that poor creature. But yes, that's. I don't know what the hell I just said. I'm on the end of a 16-hour day. You know, I've been processing fish all day, and I'm overtired and probably going to be a little fatty. So please forgive me.
Oh, this is hey, listen. The reason that I couldn't introduce you is I couldn't begin to do this.
Okay.
So you're down there foraging for fish, and what kind? And you sell them.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
You sell them.
Well, no, yes, and no. There's some species that I can do that, and I have licensing for that. And then there's some things that I have to go and get from other folks that have big, expensive licenses that I can't afford.
Well, I'm kind of envious. Your Google comes up with a plant. Mine comes up Los Angeles cougar.
Oh. Is this you know, is this not working? Because I'd rather just speak loudly. Can I just speak louder? Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you guys,
Hey,
hear me
do
when
it-
speak
do I-
in
do I
this
need it?
volume?
Yeah, hey, if,
Do you want the mic?
well, if nobody can hear me.
Yours is fine, I think it's his.
Oh, mine?
I'm just gonna speak louder.
Okay.
It's easier for me.
So why don't I start this off with how we got here and what we're planning to do. And it had to do with, can people hear me all right? Yeah, okay. So how's this? Oh, good. So it started off with my obsession with the late Pleistocene. And what I'm going to do is I'll take about 10 minutes to give you the 15,000-year history of San Francisco Bay. And it's a little bit like there was some group that did 1-minute Shakespeare plays. And so this is going to be 15,000 years of San Francisco Bay history. When the first people came here, some 14,000 years ago, the water was tied up in glaciers. It was the end of the Ice Age. And water level was so low that there was a plain out to the Farallones. And on this plain, there were bison, there were llamas, there were camels, there were dire wolves, there were Columbia mammoths, there was the great megafauna of the Pleistocene. And when the Indians first came here, this is what they found. There was no San Francisco Bay. The water level was so low that that the San Joaquin and the Sacramento River came into the delta and flowed through this big grassy meadow where San Francisco Bay is today. When it came to the Golden Gate, there was a waterfall like Niagara Falls. And this was what was here. About 10,000 years ago, the Pleistocene ended. That marvelous megafauna became extinct, and nobody's sure why. It may have had to do with people. I think it probably had to do with the fact that there were several iterations of the bay. These ice ages would come and go. And usually when the ice age would end, there were these refugia, these places of refuge where the animals could survive for a while, and then when the land came back again, they could expand. And I think there was something in the refugia that probably didn't work. Either people could hunt the animals too easily, or it may be the presence of bison. The bison had recently come, and they had changed the grassland. But for some reason or other, this marvelous megafauna ended. People began to settle around the bay. About 8,000 years ago, the water level rose to the place where it flooded San Francisco Bay. And you now had the salmon coming in. You now had the great flocks of geese and ducks. You now had people settling around the bay and living on shellfish, living on the ocean. And you had this marvelous dispersion of people, this marvelous variety of people. The numbers of languages around the bay, the numbers of different ways of living around the bay were extraordinary. When Portola came in 1769, what he saw here was extraordinary. And this is what I did with Maya Lin for her What is Missing project, is I picked up on what was there. And I'm just going to run through some of these things. So we have the first sighting of the San Francisco Bay by Europeans in 1769. We have the sighting of elk by Father Juan Crespi in 1770. Pronghorn antelope described by Francisco Palau in 1776. They live in the plains where they go in herds of 100, 200 or more. They all run together over the plains so fast that they seem to fly. Grizzly bear described by Father Pedro Font in 1770. Salmon by Juan Bautista de Anza up in the Carquinez Straits. The Indians with boats carrying these heavy salmon up to the land. Coveys of quail. The coppices and plains are full of little gray-crested partridges, which, like those of Europe, flock together, but in coveys of 300 or 400. They are fat and very well flavored. The whales, a description of the whales. It is impossible to describe either the numbers of whales with which we were surrounded or their familiarity. They spouted every half minute within a half a pistol shot of our frigates and caused the most annoying stench. We were unacquainted with this property and the whale, but the inhabitants informed us that the water thrown out by them is impregnated with this offensive smell. Sea otters. They were so abundant in 1812 that they were killed by boatmen with their oars in passing through the kelp. The migratory geese and ducks that darkened the sky, and they rose with a sound like a hurricane. George C. Yount, A Land of Plenty. The deer, and this is 1836, around Benicia. The deer, antelope, and noble elk were numerous beyond all parallel. In herds of many hundreds they might be met, so tame that they would hardly move to open the way for the traveler to pass. They were seen lying or grazing in immense herds on the sunny side of every hill, and their young, like lambs, were frolicking in all directions. The wild geese and every species of waterfowl darkened the surface of every bay and firth, and upon the land in flocks of millions they wandered in quest of insects and cropping the wild oats which grew there in the richest abundance. When disturbed, they arose to fly, and the sound of their wings was like that of distant thunder. The rivers were literally crowded with salmon. It was a land of plenty and such a climate as no other land can boast of. 1846, Edward Bryant describes herds of elk. The herds of elk were numerous. Some of them numbered at least 2,000, with their immense antlers presented when running a very singular and picturesque appearance. The Gold Rush, a description of the bird life on Farallon Islands. San Francisco restaurants in 1851. The San Francisco bills of fare present at all seasons great variety, and no one has a right to complain who has but to choose from bear, elk, deer, antelope, turtle, hares, partridges, quails, wild geese, brants, numerous kinds of ducks, snipe, plover, curlew, cranes, salmon, trout, and all the other fishes and oysters.
Quite a buffet.
What, no cormorant eggs?
Well, no. No buzzard eggs either. The tainting of the Sacramento River with runoff from the Gold Rush. In 1870, Lake Merritt was set aside as the first wildlife refuge in America. The gray whale migration described by Scammon in 1871. Eucalyptus trees described in 1878. Already big forests of them. The shrimp fisheries. And there was a time, there were all these Chinese shrimp camps around the bay, and this abundance of shrimp and this abundance of Chinese, and these two abundances met, and it must have been just amazing. The salmon fishery. Then comes the Lorenzo Soya decision in 1884, which regulated the runoff from the mines. The Sierra Club was founded in 1892. Something on native oysters. Charles Keeler talking about water conservation. Then this amazing speech by Benjamin Ide Wheeler. He was head of UC Berkeley in 1906. This generation will have, for one thing at least, a great name in history. Men of the future centuries will surely call it the generation of the great destroyers. And historians and economists will write of the riotous days of 1900, when the people used up all the petroleum, all the natural gas, all the anthracite and most of the other coal, and most of the handy iron. It will be the period when the forests were cut down or burnt up, the land stolen and the water given away. We are sure to be the subject of earnest remark. 1907, William Kent donates land for Muir Woods. deforestation. The white settlers drive the game population, the bird population down. The loss of fur animals. The East Bay Regional Park District, created in 1934 in the height of the Depression. The Marin Conservation League, established in 1934. The Greenbelt Alliance, formed in 1958. Save the Bay, founded in 1961. We quote in here that marvelous song from my old friend Malvina Reynolds, Little Boxes. The McCarter-Petrus Act in 1965 that established the San Francisco Conservation and Development Commission. Obsolete military bases become Golden Gate National Recreation Area in 1968. Earth Day in 1969. California Coastal Commission, founded in 1972. Farallon Wildlife Refuge, 1974. San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge, 74. The reintroduction of Thule elk to Point Reyes in 1978. Elephant seals returned to Point Reyes in 1981. Peregrine falcons nest in San Francisco, 2003. Porpoises return to the San Francisco Bay. The bald eagle makes a comeback. Hey, this clumsiness is amazing. Yeah, the Mission Blue butterflies released on Twin Peaks. 2012, Fryan Dam comes down and the Chinook salmon were reintroduced to the San Joaquin River. Condors were sighted in San Mateo County, 2014.
That's awesome.
So this is a hell of a history. And I'm wondering what to do with it. I'm wondering that there's something that we have before us, a history of despair, a history of loss, a history of tremendous diminishment of wildlife. We have with us all this land set aside. We have animals returning. That we have an opportunity to create a world that's never been created before. And I thought that I would love to discuss with my friends here what kind of a world this could be. So where I would love to start is one thing that I've learned in my life that you couldn't talk me out of is and one of the few things that you couldn't talk me out of in 5 minutes is that wonderful wisdom of the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard, that the root of all unhappiness is comparison. So I think we take and we compare what there is today with what there once was, and we get depressed. When Portola came here in 1769, he did not compare it to the Pleistocene. He saw something that he thought was marvelous. What are we seeing today? If you didn't have this comparison, if you had to describe what was here in this Bay Area for somebody that had never been here before, what's here? Not what should be here, but what is here? What do you see in your daily routine?
For me, I think across California, but the Bay Area is a great example of it, is possibilities. What I love about the Bay is it was almost done. I mean, I love that those three women looked at a place that was called the Big Stench, that you couldn't imagine any wildlife in, and thought there was something there worth saving. So what I see today is this urban interface that provides a lot of hope and possibilities. It's never going to be what it is. I mean, wilderness is such an interesting concept. I mean, I live in Yosemite, and man's, fingerprint, that's one of the best protected places on the planet. You still have to manage to keep the wildlife alive with climate change and pollution and everything. So this urban interface, to me, I see so many possibilities. You have beavers coming back. Martinez Beavers is a great story. the wildlife is returning. It may not be in ways it used to be, but I think it still has a pretty good chance of survival. And we have the porpoises that have returned after the water got cleaned up. And again, it still may not be the pristine Pacific, but if it's good enough for porpoises, it's nature. But to answer your question, I think one of the most amazing stories, and it's a campaign I'm working on too, is the California wolf recovery. I see wolves on the other side of the Golden Gate soon. OR7, the first wolf to, this story, it brings tears to my eyes. He traveled 3,000 miles. He now has a pack 50 miles north of the California border. They've just declared him and his pups officially a pack. And 2 days ago, they just released that a second wolf has made it down into his territory, another male. These wolves are coming, and I don't think, even though you look at San Francisco and the cityscape and the population, I see wolves in Marin in 10 years. These guys travel fast. So nature's here. It's not like it was in the Pleistocene, but it doesn't, it's an interface that I think challenges a lot of us who have been in conservation for a long time. I've worked in both Yosemite and Yellowstone, and I've had such an immense conversion. To me, wildlife was in these vast, pristine places that weren't touched. I'm now convinced urban conservation is the future, and it's the only way wildlife's gonna have a shot. So I see this bay, stuff is returning like the condor, the beavers, the porpoises. I see possibilities.
What do you see, old friend?
I agree. But no, there's no but. I agree, and I also agree that I think you hinted at this a little. If I may, it seems a little unrealistic to think that we're going to turn this estuary into what it was.
Yes, that's completely unrealistic.
Right.
It is an unrealistic. I mean, there are more invasive species if you include, tunicates and invertebrates of all kinds. There are more invasive species now than there are native species, or at least there's a balance, not a balance, but there's a strong presence of invasives that are not going to go away. But that said, I think that I feel, I don't know, I'm just speaking anecdotally here. I'm not offering you data or anything, but it seems like a good idea to make it possible for a wolf to exist. It seems like a good idea that if you're going to eat seafood, and I'm open to the argument that maybe we just shouldn't. I'm out of a job and a career at that. But if we are, it's a good idea to like maybe not buy the tuna from the longline boat that spread out 65 miles of longline and killed turtles and albatross and everything else. And in California, people are open to hearing that and to having that conversation. And I have no doubt that like the rapid growth of my business is because, well, I'm in California, I'm in San Francisco, and hopefully that's not my phone in my bag somewhere. It's okay, I'm not trying to make you feel uncomfortable, but yeah, I am actually. Am I making any sense? But I wanted to point something out, and that's that in relation to this question, when we dream too much about the past, and it's great because that dream also gets us having sustainable seafood companies and wolves. But when we spend too much time on that, we don't see what's right in front of us.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
And what's right in front of us right now is for me, this is herring season. And the herring are spawning. I'm going to go turn on my phone. It's just going to be lit up because all my buddies are out and the herring are running. And when the herring run, here's a species that has no business having survived the way it has. Look at what we did to the bay. Look at how much of the bay is landfill. Look at all of the toxins that we leach into the water. Look at the fact that we've had a gillnet fishery that's fishing a roe fishery. So targeting pregnant females. And I love all my herring fishermen friends because it's well managed and they're doing it okay. But I'm just saying, right now, that little guy is everywhere. And you can drive out and you can see a herring spawn in downtown Sausalito or out behind AT&T Park. And there's, I took an Audubon group out last year, and there's a guy, he comes out and he counts the birds. Maybe he was like an independent guy. But he came out, he had this thing, you know, and he has this grid, and he counts the friggin' seagulls. Have you guys, anyone seen this guy? But he was like, you know, he's like, oh my God. I'm like, what? There are 65,000 seagulls here. 65,000 seagulls. Right, and to us we're like, seagulls, oh my God, I hope they don't shit on my car. But my point, I'm so sorry, I'm really rambling, but my point is like, you know, if you look at how we talk a lot about mountain lions, and I love them more than anything, and I want to see one. I've never seen one. And wolves, and they're sacred and they're beautiful. And then there's like, but they're really fragile in a way, because the whole ecosystem has to be working for them to evolve. But then we take something like a herring, and the abundance of herring in San Francisco Bay is estimated to be between 60 and 90,000 tons. Now, let's take a moment when we're having that, you know, oh my God, Portola got to see it all. We didn't get to see it. You know, I'm sitting in the Neil Young thing about I'm sitting in my cubicle at the top of the stairs. You know, but let's take that moment and think how mighty is that species? That little herring, man. It's still coming here. And where does it spawn? It's looking for that eelgrass. It's looking for that eelgrass. Looking for that eelgrass. No eelgrass. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I'm gonna go extinct. No! I'm gonna freaking come all over the shoreline. I'm gonna lay my eggs right here, right underneath this garbage bar, or right along these rocks where those sewage outflow tubes are dumping their crap into the water. That to me is heroic. And raise your hand. But raise your hand. And I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. I just want to see. Raise your hand if you've been out and seen a herring spawn. A few. But we're all wildlife enthusiasts. Check it out. What's that? Here's what you got to do. Did I do this?
Go to it.
So here's what you have to do. You have to you have to figure out where all of the webcams are all over San Francisco Bay. I'm not going to tell you how to do that because then you're going to block. I'm telling you all this now. I'm screwed. I'm never going to get on that control panel. But you figure out where the webcams are, or you know, in your drivings and your meanderings, look at the shoreline. I mean, I can't believe how many people walk downtown Sausalito in the middle of a herring run. Nobody looks in the water. There's 65,000 seagulls on the shoreline, for God's sake. Those kinds of signs are indicating something. When you see in the middle of the winter, the herring come in November and they leave in March. In the middle of the winter, if you're looking out at the bay, and you see close to shore, within 100 yards of shore or so, you see pelicans dive bombing, and you see 3,000 cormorants swim by. There's a very strong likelihood that the herring are going to come in and they're going to do their business on the shoreline along the rocks, and you're going to be able to see it. And when you see it, you can have this moment. I tell everybody this. You have this moment where I just take my glasses off because then I can't see anything, and everything's blurred. It's like Seurat painting. And I stand on the shoreline, and you take off your glasses or you squint, you know, kind of cloud things out, and you put your fingers in your ears so you can't hear the cars going by. And in this brief moment, you can smell it, and you can feel it, and you see the birds going. You really actually can have, even in on 3rd Street in Hunters Point, in Candlestick Park, you can have that moment. You can have a moment where you're like, oh my God, I was there, you know? That's what it was like. You can actually achieve it, that moment of knowing, a moment of like feeling the Portola thing that he saw. You can feel it during a herring run. If everything goes right and the birds are there and things are dropping and sea lions are jumping out of the water, you can have that moment. And that little guy that we don't even have in our fish markets, because the commercial fishery catches them, ships them to Japan, where they're stripped of their eggs and thrown away. That little guy is here now, and he wants to say hi to you. You guys should go. I'm sorry, I'm totally wiped out. I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's talk about abundance. People talk about this variety of particular species, and yet some of these species are down to a fragment and down to a few, and there's a reintroduction of a couple, and there's a victory in this, and there's a need to keep diversity alive. But with abundance, I'll see abundance at Hawk Hill when the hawks are migrating. I'll see abundance in some of the marshes when the geese are lifting off.
You know, this is a tough one because of, well, first, you know, living in Yellowstone, you know, wildlife is an hour-by-hour experience. I mean, you know, it was an acceptable excuse to be late to work because you couldn't leave your house because the bison had surrounded it. You know, I mean, you know, or you leave the office, open the door, and there's a elk, you know, bull about to charge you. So you know, you got used to wildlife in abundance, the vast herds. I mean, imagine, you know, 1,000 bison. You know, most of us never see that, and that's what we had in California as well. You had these
Like Serengeti.
Yeah, I mean, it was elk in the hundreds of thousands. Robins used to, I was reading, you know, hundreds of thousands migrate in the San Joaquin Valley. But obviously with the, you know, development in urban, this becomes tougher because part of abundance is balance, and this is what I am challenged with this new sort of conservation model, in that, you know, I love the focus on, you know, what's out there now. I mean, you know, and again, I'm a recent convert. You know, until P22 walked into the middle of Griffith Park, in the middle of LA, I thought of LA as a wasteland that could support no nature. It took a mountain lion showing me that, hey, no, there's nature here. And then I began to see the smaller, the bugs, the birds. I mean, LA is the most bird diverse city in the country. It is an ecosystem. It is very diverse. They're discovering new insects down there. I mean, it is part of the, you know, ecosystem that stretches from the coastline to the Santa Monica Mountains to the middle of the city. And there's a lot down there that you notice. Same thing here. I mean, we tend to ignore, yes, we all love the wolves and the mountain lions, but we do tend to ignore. If you walk outside here, you'll see 10 birds, you know, at some point. But abundance isn't always good. And if we can't, you know, when we have an abundance of seagulls, but what are those seagulls driving out? Because perhaps the balance is out because they're feeding on the trash. What, like they see in Yosemite, is the corvids, the ravens, because of human trash, has really sort of driven out the native songbirds. So
It's happening around here with the crows.
It's
and
happening around here with the crows. Bullfrogs, you know, not a native species. I mean, you'll see bullfrogs in abundance somewhere. So it's a good sign that something's working, that nature's okay. But sometimes it can also be a sign that the ecosystem is just so deer. I mean, there's another great example. We don't have the carnivores here to take the deer out, so they're just going nuts. So I think it's a tough balancing act, and I would say that, you know, although the reason I think the wolves and mountain lions are important, and we shouldn't ignore the charismatic microfauna either. I think the herring run is, you know, one of the best shows in town too. But that's what we need to be aiming for, because, you know, when you talk about trophic cascades, LA is supporting a mountain lion. That's a pretty good indication that the health of that entire ecosystem, believe it or not, is intact. So my challenge to San Francisco, we need to be supporting the grizzly.
Oh, wow. Oh.
Hey, when have we ever let LA get ahead of us?
Hey, that's cool.
Yeah. What do you think? You in? Yeah?
I'm in.
All right. They eat fish.
Sure.
Yeah.
They eat whatever they want.
Yeah.
Pretty much, right?
Okay, so listen. I think animals adapt. People adapt to animals. And I think that the grizzly bear has not been able to adapt very well, and people have not been able to adapt very well to grizzly bears.
Oh, it's easy. It really is.
No, it isn't. You're in grizzly territory. You're scared out of your wits half the time.
Yeah, I remember reading in all the descriptions in Lewis and Clark and what that was like.
You know, living in it, I agree. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but you become accustomed to being in the middle of the food chain, and I can speak from experience. I mean, yes, having a grizzly bear in the middle of San Francisco. However, the mountain lion's a great indication in
Yes,
LA.
that's right.
They're adapting. This guy's become a rock star. LA loves him. This is LA, you know. So I would be curious how it would work, and there's no doubt it comes with danger, but it would be interesting to explore.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
So every time mountain lion abundance grows, the chance of humans encountering them in peripheral suburban areas increases, and then there's an event, like the guy that got taken off the back of the bike, the jogger that got partially eaten.
Right.
So whenever that happens, then the hunting, the big game contingent starts buying for permits to allow
Right.
hunting. If hunting began again on mountain lions, would that is there evidence to show that would devastate their populations?
The hunting the studies actually show that hunting does not help to control. There's been some recent studies, the populations. I mean, obviously, if hunting's managed responsibly, it's not going to devastate any population, right? I mean, but it's been interesting. California's a strange place, especially on the mountain lion. It's the only state where mountain lions cannot be hunted for sport, and I'm not placing a judgment on whether that's right or wrong, but by Prop 117. So the general public said not because the mountain lion's in danger, because it's not, but because we don't want these hunted. And there's been, I think it was the NRA tried to overturn it. I think it was 1996 after there were 2 attacks, and it failed. So whether if hunting was opened up again, again, hunting managed responsibly isn't going to devastate a population. But for whatever reason, they're not hunted. I mean, because of public vote.
Hey, the survival of mountain lions in California is a miracle. They've been
Yeah.
hunted. They're the bounty
They were
hunting,
hunted too, yeah.
the bounty hunters in the 30s. That there were these old Indian guys that would go into Los Padres National Forest, and the last speakers of the Salinan language, and they would go off on their horses, and they would hunt the mountain lions, and they would come back and bring them to King City for bounty, $5 each. They'd buy some booze and some bullets. They'd go back into Los Padres singing the old Salinan song. And yet there's still mountain lions out there. I mean, this.
And that's from Berkeley woman, Margaret Ewing is the one who, when they weren't, I mean, before they were protected, there was no protections. You could just kill, and that's why
Well, they were vermin.
They were vermin, right? So that's why you had none. But it was a Berkeley woman, Margaret Ewing, who, mountain lions showed up near her residence, and I think it was Fish and Game, this is in the 60s, just randomly killed it, and she was outraged. And, she had friends like Ronald Reagan, and he called all these shits, and that's where you have Prop 117. So it was a Berkeley woman who brought, not surprisingly, the mountain lion back from, which would have been extinction if it had continued, or at least they wouldn't have been in abundance.
So what we have is, I think animals are adapting to some extent. They're changing their habit. That mountain lion that's in Griffith Park people do not see it.
A few people have seen him, and that's it. 10 million visitors a year, 8 square miles. Average mountain lion range is 250 square miles, and very few people have seen him. And he's not taking out pets and eating deer. So yeah, he's really worked it out. But I think the question, I'd love your thoughts on this as someone who works in this, is it acceptable? I mean, he is a risk. All mountain lions are a risk. They're a very low risk. I mean, if you really want to be afraid, don't get in your car. Mountain lions have killed, I think, 6 people in California. It's very low in the last 100 years. But wolves, mountain lions, coyotes, even the black bears we have, they come with risks. They can hurt us. There's no doubt. Is that acceptable?
Well,
Sharks, I mean, you deal with the ocean. Is that an acceptable risk,
the
I guess?
intertidal zone has very few.
Yeah, that's true.
That's kind of why I like it. I mean, just like all of us, so like someone who's reflected a lot on wilderness, my feeling is that, I got 2 feelings. Like, I had an acquaintance of a person whose kid was mauled by a mountain lion. It was a friend of a friend.
Was that the recent?
Oh, it was years ago in Washington. and the dad hunted it down and killed it. And it was a closed discussion with him. And I just, if that something like that happened, it becomes different when it's like personal like that. At the same time, do we want? What happens to a wilderness when you pull all the fangs and the teeth out of it? Is it wilderness? No, it's Central Park. Oh, but wait a minute. Central Park is dangerous as hell. No, but you get my. I think like that's kind of what the wilderness really is. It should have some teeth.
So you haven't, down in Los Angeles, in Griffith Park, there are people picnicking. Everybody knows the mountain lion is there. They got their kids playing. Los Angeles has accepted the risk of the mountain lion. And I think there's that change of human feelings.
There's
that's going
something
on.
beautiful about that.
And it may be that we're so far removed from wildlife that we no longer understand that it's a threat. But there's something about, your backyard wilderness stuff that is, on one hand, paltry, on one hand, it's disturbing. There was a guy in Berkeley, I don't know, is Sterling Bonnell still around? Do people know Sterling? Is he still alive? So Sterling was once talking about the deer in the Berkeley Hills, never having been to Tilden, that they live in the Berkeley parks. Huh?
Mike.
Oh, we'll use the mic. So Sterling was talking about, can I just wave it around? So Sterling was talking about the deer in the Berkeley Hills, never having been to Tilden, that they're reproducing in people's backyards, that they're courting each other in people's backyards. And there's something about that that is both disturbing and wonderful.
I think that's, I work for a very old nonprofit, the National Wildlife Federation, 1936, came out of, sort of the wildlife refuge and the hunters and sportsmen after, conservation was science and you didn't. What I'm challenging these days, and I'll tell you, I give the scientists back at our headquarters in DC, they look at me with utter horror or like a heretic, is that it's a new relationship. You look at the Facebook foxes, how many have heard of them? That's another project we're working on. And Bill, yay, that the Bill is here, and Greg, I hope, who again will be at the reception to talk about this. But, that's a family of foxes shows up on the Facebook campus. And I'll tell you, if you haven't been to the Facebook campus, I want to live there. It's 57 acres. They have a Zen garden. They have free beer. It's just a wonderful place. This family shows up and gives birth right on the boardwalk. Like where you are. These are not. And the employees, these are non-environmentalists. These are computer nerds. They work it out with Bill's help and Greg's help. They go talk to them, but they're not feeding the foxes. They're not petting them. But you see the great photos of the foxes sleeping on the employees' cars, and the employees will just go back. They go out to the parking lot. They don't want to wake the fox up, so they'll go back to their office. Or they'll be, outside on the computer, and the fox will run by. So the foxes are used to people. They behave differently than foxes that aren't in the urban setting. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's not wildlife like we were taught, like I was taught growing up, Born Free, where they go out into the Serengeti. But it's what it's going to take. Wildlife's running out of room, and I think it's okay. They've adapted to other things over the millennia. I think urbanization is another adaptation, because urbanization is not going away. If it was, great. We could get back to these vast herds, right? But we're not. It's just the reality. So maybe this is the compromise that we all can help facilitate.
Hey, we live in an urban area. People are not going to disappear.
Right.
So either we have a wildlife desert or we make these compromises. I don't think we make these compromises in Yellowstone. I don't think we make these compromises in wild lands. But maybe around here there's a different orientation that we should have. So what's our behavior? What's proper behavior toward these animals? Do we manage them? I'm working with Bryce Lundberg of Lundberg Rice, and we're doing some stuff up in the Sacramento Valley. And up there you have these marvelous wildlife refuges. And you come in at this season of the year, and the The snow geese are so plentiful. You come in when they lift off. It's one of the most magnificent things I've ever seen. They lift off with this roar of wings. You have no idea whether it's happening inside you or outside you. It's completely transformative. It's the most marvelous kind of marshes. It's totally artificial. It's plumbing. These marshes have been created. This is not going back to an old Sacramento Valley. This is a this is management. And the geese seem to like it, the ducks seem to like it. I find that a little bit disturbing, but I'm not sure there's an alternative. Do we have a hands-off relationship to these? You eat them.
I eat them. What am I going to do? You make me feel so guilty.
That strikes me as a pretty healthy relationship.
Yeah. You're talking in the context of our urban.
Yeah, I'm talking about how do we nurture them? Do we create artificial places where they can survive? In some ways, with this Endangered Species Act, we are creating artificial places. We're creating situations where animals are kept alive on life support. And we have a moral obligation to do it. There's a legal obligation to do it. But there's something about it that is repugnant.
The Endangered Species Act?
The particular managing of certain wildlife to keep them alive.
I never thought of it as repugnant. But I see your point. I think some people feel, yeah. So I guess I can speak more about like what people are actually doing as opposed to what they should do. I feel more comfortable
Okay.
with that. I always have a problem with should. I think that, so for many years I had this blog. I don't do it anymore because once you have kids, it's really hard to do stuff for free all the time. I've found. But in any case, I had this blog, and it was dedicated to kind of the weird species of our shores, the things that kind of, or not even weird, but overlooked. Sometimes because they're so close to us, because we see so many of them. And it was a result of all of this time I was spending walking along the shorelines and just seeing countless people fishing and gathering, hunting and gathering along the shoreline. And there's a pretty, there's a large segment of the population that's actually going out along the shorelines and harvesting their dinner. And I mean, there's a whole ilk of that's, you know, guys with $60,000 Grady Whites that go and they launch it on the weekends and they get all their Dungeness crabs and they get their rockfish and their salmon. And that's a whole thing. But then there's also just, you know, poor people who wake up in Hunters Point and, you know, take a bus or walk down to the shoreline and start fishing. And they're catching things that are, I mean, if you took like an average San Francisco Bay fisherman's discard pile, right? If you took all the bones that guy ate, so you take a guy that fished 150 days a year, and there's a lot of people like that, and you take all the bones and you throw them in the pile, and at the end of the year you compare that pile to an 8,000-year-old shell mound from Shell Mound Avenue. There will be some things in that pile that weren't in the 8,000-year-old pile, but there will be a lot that was in there that was here at that time. And I don't really know what my point is, but what I'm saying is that for a certain segment of our community, of our population, their relationship, yeah, they're riding buses and yeah, they're part of the grid. But for, you know, Sunday afternoon, the guy goes out in his boat and catches Dungeness crabs. He's, you know, the relationship is on some level similar, a little bit, to ancient relationships to nature. And should that be happening? Should a person eat a leopard shark out of San Francisco Bay? Probably not, for several reasons. Mercury loads being one of those.
It's a good one.
Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons being another. But in any case, I think that there is, and it's been proven, I think on a level, that there's ample room for harvesting and, if not subsisting, at least partaking and harvesting within reason our resources.
Can I take a stab at yours too? Because I think this is key, and I think you're really getting to the. We all have a relationship with wildlife and nature. Every one of us, even people who we don't think have one. But I think I think environmentalists, and I'm including myself in this, or scientists, have done a big disservice the last maybe 50 years in that we've been told there's only one way to have it. There's only one right way. You have to think, like a scientist, or you have to have this, nature's only okay in the high Sierra because that's preserved, or nature's only okay if you name, if you talk about a mountain lion in very scientific terms. And that is a view of the world, but it's not the only view. And I think it's distanced a lot of us from nature, because the environmental movement is failing. I mean, I'm part of it. We are not getting new converts, and it's because we have not valued a lot of diversity in thinking. And I say that both culturally, demographically, but I also say sort of imaginatively. And that's, when Malcolm and I talked about a California wildlife book, we didn't want to just write another. We wanted to tell stories, because P22 is a great example. They've been talking about wildlife corridors for 20 years down there, and how the 101 is, just in the way of maintaining the integrity of the ecosystem for the Santa Monica Mountains, and how these cats are getting killed. What rallied LA? What got me on the BBC? What got, us on the front page of the Wall Street Journal? One animal that LA had had given a personality to, which again in the past was no-no. People could relate. Who can't relate with, having to cross freeways and being terrified, or being a lonely bachelor stuck without a girlfriend, right? Building relationships with nature on your own terms, allowing yourself to have relationships with animals. It's not about going up and petting P22 or petting the Facebook foxes, but it is about developing an imaginative relationship, the poetry, the things that get us inspired so that we will want to save them, that we've really failed at, I think. And that I think is coming back with this urban interface. Like with OR7, same thing. Look at the world has rallied around that wolf. In California, we're giddy. I mean, we're like, woohoo, because it's one wolf. We can identify with that journey. So for whatever it's worth.
Hey, let me ask one last question, then we'll open it up, and for attack.
Uh-oh.
So what does a healthy urban wildlife situation look like?
Am I going first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Herring, right? Herring everywhere.
Yeah, herring is good.
Yeah. Actually. But I mean, ideally, it would be all of the things that traditionally ate them.
Oh, yep.
And some of those are there. And then there are new ones that are eating them, like our striped bass. That's a really good question, because immediately I start doing the thing where I'm going back in time. I'm thinking about that.
Hey, why don't I just throw this in? One of the things that I've come to realize is we live in a changing world. The Bay Area has been changing forever, and this idea of preserving things in a changing world leads you to paradox and defeat. And I think what we probably have to preserve is the capacity of the land to change, the capacity of systems to evolve, and I'm not sure how we do this in an urban environment.
I think that you all, in an urban environment especially, I mean, there's sort of the big picture where you can do things, and I think it needs to be incorporated into city planning, things like wildlife overpasses or underpasses, city parks that are have enough trees and for birds and native species, things like that. So I think there's the bigger picture urban planning, if I can get really in the weeds. But to me, it's all of us. I don't care if you live in an apartment building with no balcony, you probably have a window. You could do a hanging garden for hummingbirds. I think it's that wildlife becomes part of our value system in an urban setting again, and we don't just treat it as something that we see when we go to Yosemite. And so that means doing things in our day-to-day lives that may be different, but we all can help, and it's actually pretty simple. Wildlife doesn't need a lot. The Facebook foxes, they needed a foot corridor, right, Bill? I mean, they got from the Palo Alto Baylands. They don't need a lot. They really don't. So
it just needs to not suck.
That's my new campaign motto. Thank you. Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, so 2 years ago, how many years ago? That's terrible. It wasn't 2 years ago. When was the Costco Butte Sand? Does anybody remember? Okay, so the Costco Butte Sand was the big tanker that was going out the gate and ran into the guy ran into the bridge in fog, and then bunker fuel spilled out 50,000 gallons, which is like a drop in the bucket as far as oil spills go, supposedly. But man, where all of that stuff landed, where all that ended up settling, not all of it, some of it went out the gate and then up the beaches and it fouled the sand and everything, but a lot of it went along the shoreline where herring spawned, and it just devastated them. I mean, they just stopped going to those areas for 2 or 3 years. There were no spawns in those areas at all, because no one really knows if herring actually go back to the exact same spot, like a salmon, or if they just kind of go near it. But it sure seems like there were studies done on what the bunker fuel did to the herring eggs. So yeah, if we do stuff like that, we don't even get herring. So I think what is a healthy ecosystem? It depends on. Yeah, it's really rather subjective. Herring can survive through almost anything. Our recent decline of salmon, when everybody was talking about salmon just were going extinct, the last 3 years have been great. Ocean abundance of salmon is considered fairly healthy, and that's only because reasonable water management policy. Shoot me. But I was like, just make it reasonable. Just don't, if you suck so much water out of the system that the water temperature goes up and the parasite loads increase and the fish can't get through, yeah, then they're all going to die. But if we can just maybe not have the paradigm of the thing that we're shooting for is Portola, and maybe it's not like the Costco Butte Sand oil spill, and that when they sucked all the water out of the Klamath and all the fish died. But maybe we keep it even here, on that spectrum. Be concerned enough to make it not suck. That's what a healthy.
Yes.
At least that. And if we can at least establish that, then maybe we can use that as a benchmark to put eelgrass beds in the South Bay.
Yes.
Right? And to get the friggin' mountain lion back to where it was 500 years ago. Why not? And the grizzly bear.
Woohoo! Grizzly bear and herring.
Kirby Cove.
Woohoo! Please sign up for our new campaign. Make sure it doesn't suck.
Is there a rejoinder? Some questions?
Oh, God.
Or comments or observations? Or the increase of turkeys. Hey, let's talk about the increase of turkeys.
Hey, Malcolm, if I could, real quick. Guys, I know we're running a little long, so if you need to get out, it's totally cool. And will be a reception in the lobby afterwards, but we encourage you to stick around. I'm sure we're going to have some great questions. So,
How much longer do we have for questions?
10 minutes.
Okay.
We have the same problem where I live in Yosemite. I have about 30 that, and I have mountain lions and bears and coyotes in my yard. I mean, to me, it speaks to, again, an ecosystem out of balance. They don't have a predator that's taking them out enough, so you have, and that's where it is really hard. You have to manage you're going to have to manage wildlife in a setting that is unnatural. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, sorry. She says she likes the turkeys. I do too, but it's interesting because everybody's perception's different. I'd say the animal I get the most questions and actually hatred over is squirrels, right? I mean, that people just hate, either love or hate squirrels.
That's because they haven't met raccoons.
Yes, they haven't met raccoons yet. So, yeah, or wild pigs,
Or because they haven't eaten squirrels.
They haven't eaten squirrels, exactly. So, yeah. So it's an interesting one because some people hate the turkeys. I've seen headlines of get rid of them, and other people love them. And that's a tough one. Like, what value system are you? Yes.
Hey, let me make a comment on this, because at one time, all of these marvelous animals that were here were not here. They came in from someplace else. And this is a natural phenomenon. We've created a situation in which there's an orthodoxy, there's a purity of native animals and native plants, and no change is allowed. Our whole history has been animals and plants coming in, and these turkeys have come in, and maybe we ought to welcome them.
I think it's a great view.
First of all, I really wanted to 1,000 comments, 1,000 questions. But I think that point that you made about the value system and how there's the phrase that, it's not a wildlife problem, it's a people problem. So in relation to the question you said about like valuing diversity and different things, related to these things is like the power of language. Like what have you found in terms of that, how we refer to something? Is it a vermin or is it valued? When we look at pigeons, like, oh, they're just rats with wings, versus look at these spectacular creatures that have adapted to this urban cliff setting, right? I bring that up because I think, what have you found in terms of how that framing really affects people, but also how it invites their knowledge? Because it's that question of, like, you can easily shut someone down to them trying to create these connections to the wildlife that they're seeing. And like going around the fishing and the hunting and gathering, like what have you found, what people tell you back? Not just the data collection, but like the stories that they have or how they identify as particular animal or species. Even if it might be inaccurate, but like essentially it's like you're getting to hear their relationship, how they've established it, and how you don't want to automatically correct that, but maybe to like use it as a conversation point to really bring that out.
Well, one thing that I had noticed in years of interviewing and talking to fishermen, and especially on the assignments where I was on foot, not on a big boat or something, but even there sometimes. But and I'm actually glad you asked this. The people that you run into, take for instance, there's a fish that lives in. Let's do here. There's a fish that lives in Berkeley. You can find it off the rocks in the marina, and then up in Richmond, all along the bay, anywhere there's rocky shoreline, any kind of jetty-like thing, and it's called a black surf perch, Ymbiatoka jacksonii, which always impresses people. Or not, but it's a little fish, and there's like it's just so funny. There's like they call them pogies, like that, which is I guess because it's kind of the same body shape as a porgy, and then it's got sort of an Oakland thing, and it's such a tough little fish, and it's really interesting to me because you talk to people that hunt the pogie, and they're so into it. And they're like, and it's like tough guys. It's always, it's this little fish, and they're proud of them, and they, and it's like, you could imagine that there's like East Bay Pogey Fishermen's Club. I can see that. and it's got it would not be, you wouldn't see Tom Steenstra with no beige, no well manicured beards. It's like hoodies and a pit bull tied to the rail and pogies in the bucket. and I've noticed this. Also with the, if you spread it out socioeconomically, you go sort of up to socioeconomic. So then there's the guys that are like the salmon guys, right? And then there's the salmon guys who catch salmon from shore. That's a thing. and then there's the monkey-faced eel man. Alone. No, there's like two of us. Three. No, there's a bunch. A lot of people like monkey-faced eels. But people do identify with that, and it becomes almost like a totem almost. And I've seen this with leopard sharks. There's like leopard shark fishing. What are you fishing for? We're leopard shark guys. They're always missing their front two teeth. Neck tattoo's really popular, like the kind of guys in bars, they would eat it as leopard shark. Sturgeon, and then there's guys that do it all, but there really is, amongst those people, they really, really are into those species, and they identify with them on a personal level. Does that answer anything?
I think that sense of identity and how they connect with animals different than we might expect.
And that's what I think we have to get more respectful of, I think, in the environmental communities. That's nature. That's that to them. They have a connection to wildlife that will makes them care. It may be different than how we all connected, but that's a relationship.
So Malcolm up top.
Hey, Malcolm.
Hey, buddy.
Growing up in Oakland in the 60s, I used to work for the city, and we ran a day camp in those days up in Redwood Regional Park, in constant struggle with the EBRPD, but that's a different story. But regardless, one of the things that was amazing was even back in 1967, 68, was we would do local foraging for all the things, the kids thought we were nuts, but we would get everything, so many different things that you could gather in not only in the Oakland Hills, but in the streets. And one of those things leads me to my question, which is, talk about the elderberry.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. Hey, I'm just going to say one other thing, and that is a couple of weeks ago we had Sylvia McLaughlin's, I think it was her 96th birthday in our office. And she was, and for years I would go out with her to find out how she had created Save the Bay. And she did not create it, it was not created from a desire for diversity, for species, for saving species. It was aesthetics. It was the beauty of the bay that saved it. And I think that there's something in the stories that we tell, there's something in Kirk's engagement with these animals that is so vigorous. It doesn't have the piety of the usual stuff that comes through. There's something about it that's visceral. There's something about those women that didn't want the view from their windows wrecked. And this is not to diminish their concern, but their concern was basically for beauty. And whenever I hear, and I think beauty of stories, beauty of engagement, this physicality is the way that I think we have to go. So I had a wonderful friend, Bun Lucas. Leanne knows Bun, and Janine knows Bun. He was a Pomo Indian from Kashaya. And one day I was out with him on the Kashaya Reservation, which is in Sonoma County. And it was springtime, and we came upon an elderberry bush, and it was blooming. And it had those big, fragrant white umbels with that delicious smell. And I said, Bun, isn't this beautiful? And he says, yes, it is, but it makes me sad. And I said, why does it make you sad? And he says, it makes me sad because when the elderberry blooms, it means we can no longer go down to the coast to get shellfish. So I said, oh, so when can you go back down again? He says, when the berry ripens, it tells us we can go back down. And it keyed me into a phenomenological calendar that all the events that were happening were linked to one another by stories. And you ended up having Strawberry Festival when the strawberries ripened. You knew 4 days later you could collect Brodea bulbs on a certain hill. Every tribe, every valley had its own calendar marking. The elderberry was a marker for this calendar. It was one of the linchpins of the calendar. It had other uses to it all. You could make clapper sticks out of it all. And clapper sticks were these split stick rattles that keep time in a dance. And the elderberry clapper stick, you'd see these old timers with these rattles, and the dancers would be dancing there, and they'd shake the rattle in their face to get energy into them. They'd keep the rhythm of the dance. Elderberry was used for flutes, and the flutes were made. They were lovemaking. You play a flute and you show some woman your soul, and she'd fall in love with you, which is the best use of an elderberry you can have. So the way that you knew which elderberry had the best music in it was you go out on a windless day when there was no wind, when it was absolutely calm. You'd look at the elderberry, and you'd see on the elderberry, on this completely windless day, there would be a leaf that would be trembling. And you knew that was the elderberry that had the music in it. There's something in this linkage between, this imaginative linkage between people and the plants that I just love. I think these Indian tales that we hear about how buckeye tree married hummingbird, and they gave birth to a rock, and you kind of listen to this stuff and you wonder, what the hell is this all about? I think it's not preserving knowledge. I think it's preserving wonderment. And I think that wonderment is the key to a whole lot of this stuff. And the elderberry preserved time. It was an old sense of time. It was the time of the clapper stick. It was the timing of this phenomenological calendar. It was an organic time. It was not the mechanical time that we suffer now. We were going to end up having to end this because the mechanical time was over.
How about a big round of applause for our guest tonight?
Hey,
Thanks so much for coming out.
Can I make, before you go to the reception, there's some people you want to talk to here I want to introduce. They're researchers I work with on the projects. And one I sort of work with, Alan Fish is here. Sorry to call you out, Alan, from the Raptor Observatory. So there's someone you want to pick the brain. Bill Kinnear, who I work with on the Porpoise Project. He will tell you about how porpoises have 18-inch penises. Go talk to him. And Greg and Bill are up there. Raise your hands. We work with them on creating wildlife corridors in Silicon Valley. They'll tell you all about burrowing owls and foxes. But for the reception, these people, please pick their brain. They have wonderful stories, and they're doing great work that we're helping to support. So.
Great. Thanks, guys. Please join us out in the lobby for the reception.